All right. Looks like we got a bit of a different kind of topic today. And I know I talked about this about a couple weeks back, I believe, or probably a bit longer. And it was more a topic about like it was about white men. Like majority of men were single. It's from like an older survey, but this one's going to be a little bit different. It's actually a Reddit post that someone had shared with me because they like to scroll on Reddit a lot, and I happen to look on Reddit when I look for topics. So this one in particular is just from r/ask, and it just goes over and says, is there really a male loneliness epidemic, or is it just that male loneliness is being talked about now? So there's layers to this stuff, of course, but I'm gonna say my quick thoughts is that, to sum up before I go into anything else, is that I don't believe it's just particularly a male loneliness epidemic. I feel like there's a loneliness epidemic for everybody, and it could happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes people move into new places and you don't really have anyone to talk to, or sometimes you're just going through the motions, local depression, all that fun stuff, or perhaps you just have a hard time, opening up and getting to know people. And yeah, that's really what it is. I don't believe it's particularly to the male side. I just believe that in terms of what this question also asks is that male loneliness has been brought up more and more due to a variety of reasons. And of course, you had people like Andrew Tate who were extremely popular, spreading that message or trying to get out to the young, young men who were looking for some guidance, and he made his money off of that, which is very ironic. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to go through, and the first one I want to go about is I feel like nowadays it's much easier to be isolated due to the fact that modern technology, for all its faults and all its good it brings, it's much easier to like recluse yourself into an area. Because think about it, if you have a good laptop or even a good like computer or even a console, it's much easier to just section yourself off and say, you know what, I don't want to talk to people today, I don't have work, I'm just going to go be by myself today, which is kind of what I did. And so you have access to a lot of other stuff that can keep you very distracted. Actually, there's this book I was reading where it talked about how we're on autopilot like a lot of the time, and also there's a lot of 21st century distractions, I believe is what they called it. And so one of those is, like I said, phones, computers, all that. Basically, you have a mini package in your fingertips, like right here, that can give you what you need. If you need to go watch the news, you don't have to go outside and get a newspaper. You can just go online or even ask Siri, and she'll tell you. Or if you just want to play a video game where it's nice and quiet, no one's going to bother you, especially if you like single player games like me, you can just be on your own and just not have to bother with anybody. And that's really what I feel like is the first reason as to why, at least what really propelled this idea much more forward. And the second one that I'm going to really get into is really, it's easier to be alone just because, like, let's be honest too, do we really have like community around here? Because think about it this way, right? Back then, which actually ties into my first point, even back how many years ago, and say when your parents or whatever were younger, there was always sort of a community-ish base around, which made it easier for you to talk to people or get to know more people. Because that's really how you branch off. You start in your own community and you go out from there. So I feel like community is kind of a lost concept nowadays, and it's all, especially in the Western world, it's all about the individual and how can the individual progress. But the individual is not the only person who can make it through. You still need a support network regardless. Like every successful business that's out there, they can tell you that they put in the hours all you want, but they had to get the clientele, they had to get people to invest into them, they had to manage people. Like it was still to an extent a group effort. While one person may take all the credit, it's all about building yourself up from there. And which is also, guess what? A community. Like, I want you to think about this too. Whenever you watch a movie, and if you really, really are bored, look at the end credits and see how many people it takes to make 1 to 2 hour movie. Them credits be going for a while because guess what? It'll take you some time. So that's really what I believe would be the cause of like the loneliness epidemic. Or I don't know if it's an epidemic, but it's more like why it's been brought more to attention these days. And no, sometimes it's just hard. Also, I'm going to bring a little bit of a distinction here with that being lonely and being alone are not the same thing. And when I say that, it's more like It's a concept that sounds like it's supposed to sound the same, but it's really not the same. For instance, being alone to me sounds like it's a choice that you're taking it upon yourself to say, I want to be left alone for the day. I don't want to really talk to people. I just want to, be with my pets and chill out. That's what alone sounds like to me. But when you talk about being lonely, that sounds more circumstantial. Because, like I previously said, you had stuff like depression or you have a lack of social networks, which is really does not help you within, finding people. And I would say that it's very important to make friends in like all walks of life, whether it's an online friend or whether it's IRL or whatever. I think it's important just because a friend, especially a good friend, will always tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. Because what happens is that sometimes when you're alone and you have certain thoughts about yourself, you will end up reinforcing those, it's like called negative biases. So you have negative biases that get pushed out to you, and it's you get to affirm them more and more and more because you are by yourself. You don't have anybody to check you. That's why community is great. You know, it's like you have a bunch of people who have a different perspective, and they can see that you, even though you see yourself one way, it's not really, the way that you should be seen. Or at least objectively speaking, it's not as bad as you put on yourself. Because our worst critics are always ourselves. And so where does all lead back to our original question? Well, in terms of men, which I can only speak for men, to us, it feels like you had to figure all this out on your own. No one can really tell you this. And that's very dangerous and very annoying because a lot of us did not figure out all this on our own. It took sometimes someone to point us in the right direction. It also takes someone else to, point out our own flaws. And you see this in a lot of people because even if you're the most self-aware person and you reflect every single day, you're going to miss something about yourself. You're not going to understand that. And so why this whole loneliness is a big problem is because when you have people who are alone by themselves, you will find them getting drawn into more and more extreme camps, along with the negative biases that I mentioned earlier. So how do we solve this problem? Well, I don't have any solutions, unfortunately. I can maybe bring up how I've figured some of this stuff out myself, and it's just for me. I won't speak for everyone, just for me. I found out just going out and exploring is really how I've understood a lot of different types of concepts, especially stuff like friendships and this and that, and like taking chances. I had to do this by branching out and exploring. And not just exploring the physical world, but also exploring just my own mind and exploring different avenues of life, looking for different types of perspectives. That's where it really counts for me. And it also goes back to what I say too, is that, if you've ever find yourself, lonely and this and that, I would say just sit yourself down and really go over why you are the way you are. Because at the end of the day, the only person you can really change is yourself. You know what I mean? While being alone feels like it's good all the time, it's like we are social creatures, okay? Even the most stoic man needs some form of social stuff in their life. And this is particularly for men, by the way, because, like I said, that's the initial question. But same goes for anyone else, whatever you want to call yourself. And so, with all that being said, yes, there is a loneliness epidemic. And the best way to cure it is really, take some chances. Make mistakes. Get messy. That's a Magic School Bus quote for all those who watched that back in the day. Eeny. Yeah, and it also goes back to what I'd also advise people is the same stuff I go back to every single other week. Well, not go back every single week, but what I mentioned prior is sometimes you gotta clean up your room, dude. Sometimes you gotta go back and see what is so messy that's in my room. What do I have to toss out? What do I have to get rid of? That's where you have to start. Always start with yourself. Always. And I know there will be people who will inevitably burn you, or people who will be less favorable, but don't let that stop you from progressing in your own life. You should really take what you learn and see how you can apply it better. What can I learn from somebody? Or what can I learn from the situation to help me be a better person? And that's really the start. Of course, there is many, 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 many factors as to why people are lonely. But what matters is you should take the first step no matter what it is. And for all the men, I'll say this much. At least for me, go out and explore. I always say, I don't always say this, but what I like to say is sometimes men don't get lost. We go exploring, and sometimes that means you gotta explore in your own head, and that's really what matters to me. Of course, this is only simply like a branch off point. This is not really in depth like research type of stuff. I just saw this and it was really interesting, so I just want to drop a couple of quick thoughts about it and then move on from there. So, if you enjoyed this video and you like me doing more discussions such like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow my socials down in the description below. And like I said, I'm really trying to be more active on Instagram, but this is a pain in the butt. I don't like social media that much, but I really gotta hop to it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and hopefully on to the next video. Peace.